Doctor left veteran single dad to die. But when his little girl clutched his special ops medal, a shocking truth exploded, forcing the hospital board to fire everyone. But what secret could be so powerful it tears down an entire system? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The kitchen timer chimed as Ethan Cole pulled a tray of chicken nuggets from the oven. His hands trembled slightly, and he pressed his palm against his chest, trying to ease the dull ache that had been bothering him all afternoon. The pain was getting worse, but he forced a smile as Lily bounced into the kitchen, her dark pigtails swinging. "Is dinner ready, Daddy?" she asked, climbing onto her usual chair at their small kitchen table. "You bet, Princess." Ethan's voice remained steady, despite another sharp twinge. He arranged the nuggets on her favorite Wonder Woman plate, adding a handful of baby carrots and some ranch dressing. "Got your vegetables, too." Lily wrinkled her nose but giggled. "Do I have to eat all of them?" "Tell you what," Ethan said, easing himself into the chair across from her. "Eat half the carrots, and we'll call it even." As Lily chatted about her day at school, Ethan barely touched his own food. The pressure in his chest was building, spreading across his collarbone and down his left arm. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead, but he kept his face neutral, nodding at Lily's stories about recess and art class. And then Sarah said she's getting a puppy for her birthday. Lily continued, dunking a carrot in ranch. "Could we get a puppy someday, Daddy?" "We'll see, sweetheart." Ethan swallowed hard, his fork trembling as he pushed food around his plate. "Right now it's getting close to bedtime. How about we get you ready?" In Lily's bedroom, decorated with butterfly decals and twinkling string lights, Ethan helped her into her favorite unicorn pajamas. His movements were slower than usual, each bend sending waves of discomfort through his chest. "Can you read me a story?" Lily asked, snuggling under her purple comforter. "Just a short one tonight, okay?" Ethan settled carefully on the edge of her bed, picking up a well-worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. His voice wavered slightly as he read, but Lily didn't seem to notice. After finishing the story, Ethan tucked the blanket around her shoulders. "Sweet dreams, Princess. How about chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast tomorrow?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Promise, promise." He kissed her forehead, his hands shaking as he switched on her nightlight. "I love you to the moon and back." "Love you more, Daddy." Ethan closed her door partway, then stumbled to his bathroom. The face in the mirror looked pale and drawn, his features tight with pain. He dry swallowed 2 aspirin, but the crushing sensation in his chest only intensified. Hours crawled by. Ethan lay in bed, each breath becoming more difficult. Around midnight, a wave of nausea hit him, along with pain so intense it brought tears to his eyes. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. With trembling fingers, he dialed Mrs. Martinez next door, but there was no answer. Fighting panic, Ethan realized he had no choice. He made his way to Lily's room, hating to wake her but knowing he couldn't leave her alone. "Lily, sweetheart," he whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. "Wake up, baby. We need to go somewhere." Lily blinked sleepily. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing serious," he lied, helping her into her coat over her pajamas. "But we need to visit the hospital, okay?" Lily's eyes widened with worry as she slipped her feet into her pink sneakers. "Are you sick?" "Just not feeling great. I'll be fine once we see a doctor." Ethan grabbed his keys and wallet, along with the Medal of Valor he'd earned in Special Ops. Lily always said it made her feel safe, and right now, they both needed that comfort. The drive to the emergency room was torture. Every bump in the road sent spikes of pain through Ethan's chest. He could feel Lily's concerned gaze from the back seat, and he tried to keep his breathing steady, not wanting to frighten her more than she already was. The emergency room was surprisingly quiet when they arrived. Ethan parked haphazardly near the entrance, each step toward the sliding doors requiring immense effort. Lily clutched his hand, her other hand holding tight to his medal, which she'd taken from his jacket pocket. At the check-in desk, Ethan could barely speak. "Need help," he gasped, leaning heavily on the counter. "Chest pain. Getting worse." The receptionist looked up, starting to push forms toward him. But Ethan's legs gave out. He crumpled to the floor, dimly aware of Lily's frightened cry. "Daddy!" She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Someone help my daddy." A young doctor approached, his white coat pristine, his manner dismissive.
"Sir, you need to move to the waiting area."
he said, barely glancing at Ethan's writhing form. "Please." Ethan managed between gasps. "Can't breathe," the doctor sighed, checking something on his clipboard. "Probably just anxiety. We see it all the time in veterans. Take some deep breaths and fill out these forms." Lily held up Ethan's medal, her small voice trembling. "My daddy's a hero. He's really hurt." But the doctor was already turning away, muttering something about men like him, always exaggerating. Ethan tried to reach for Lily, to comfort her, but his vision was growing dark around the edges. The pain in his chest was unbearable now. "Help!" Lily's scream echoed through the emergency room. "Please help my daddy, he's dying." Ethan could feel himself slipping away. His daughter's terrified face, the last thing he saw as consciousness faded. The medal of valor glinted in her small hands as she continued to cry for help, her voice growing more distant with each passing second. As darkness closed in, Ethan's last coherent thought was of Lily. He had promised her pancakes for breakfast. He had promised to always be there for her. The weight of those broken promises followed him into unconsciousness as his daughter's desperate pleas for help went unanswered. Ethan's world spun in dizzying circles. The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room blurred into streaks of white, and the cold linoleum floor pressed against his cheek. Through the fog of pain crushing his chest, he heard Lily's voice, small and desperate. "Please help my daddy, someone help." The dismissive doctor's footsteps echoed as he walked away. "Just another case of anxiety. He can wait." Nurse Julia Morales watched in disbelief as the doctor abandoned her station. Her dark eyes narrowed, and she quickly knelt beside Ethan's crumpled form. The little girl's tears broke her heart. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" Julia pressed her fingers to Ethan's neck, counting the rapid, irregular pulse. His skin felt clammy under her touch. She recognized the signs immediately. This was no anxiety attack. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Julia asked Lily while reaching for her phone. "Lily." The little girl sniffled, clutching something metal that glinted under the lights. "Please don't let my daddy die." Julia's fingers flew across her phone's keypad, breaking protocol but following her conscience. "I won't, Lily. I promise." She sent an urgent page to Dr. Harold Bennett, a retired cardiologist who volunteered at the hospital several nights a week. If anyone could help, it would be him. "Hold on, sir," Julia murmured, rolling Ethan onto his side. His breathing came in shallow gasps. "Help is coming." Dr. Harold's steady footsteps approached within minutes. His silver hair caught the light as he hurried down the corridor, medical bag in hand. Despite being retired, he moved with the urgency of a man half his age. "What do we have?" he asked, kneeling beside Julia. "Male, mid-30s, possible cardiac event." The attending physician dismissed. "Daddy got his medal for saving people," Lily interrupted, holding out the decoration pinned to her jacket. "Can you save him like he saved them?" Dr. Harold's eyes widened as he recognized the Special Operations Medal of Valor. Without hesitation, he opened his medical bag and pulled out a stethoscope. "Young lady, your father is in good hands now. Nurse Morales, let's get him into Bay 3, immediately." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Julia helped transfer Ethan onto a gurney while Dr. Harold called out orders in a calm but authoritative voice. They rushed him into the treatment bay, monitors beeping urgently as they connected leads to his chest. "Significant ST elevation," Dr. Harold muttered, studying the heart monitor. "Nurse, start an IV line. We need medication on board now." Julia worked quickly, her movements precise despite the pressure. Lily stood in the corner watching with wide eyes as they fought to save her father's life. The medal still gleamed in her small hands. "Blood pressure's dropping," Julia reported, her voice tight with concern. Dr. Harold nodded, his experienced hands moving surely as he administered medication through the IV. "Come on, soldier," he murmured. "Fight with me here." Minutes stretched like hours as they worked. Gradually, the erratic beeping of the heart monitor steadied. Ethan's color improved, and his breathing became less labored. Dr. Harold kept a careful watch over the vital signs, making adjustments to medication doses as needed. Through the long night, Julia stayed well past her shift, checking on Ethan regularly. She brought Lily a blanket and some juice from the break room, sitting with her between rounds. The little girl refused to leave her father's side, curled up in a chair next to his bed. As dawn approached, Ethan's eyelids finally fluttered. The pain in his chest had dulled to a manageable ache. His vision cleared enough to make out Lily's small form beside him, sound asleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair. The Medal of Valor was still clutched in her tiny hand, catching the first rays of morning sun through the window. Ethan's throat felt dry and rough, but he managed to whisper, "I'm here, baby girl." He reached out with trembling fingers to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I promise I won't leave you." Lily stirred slightly at his touch but didn't wake. Dr. Harold stood in the doorway, watching the tender moment with gentle eyes. The old doctor had stayed through the night as well, monitoring his patient's recovery with dedication born from decades of experience. "Your daughter's faith in you saved your life tonight, Doctor," Harold said softly, approaching the bed. "She wouldn't let anyone take that medal. Said it was proof that you were a hero." Ethan's eyes misted as he looked at his sleeping daughter. "She's the real hero," he whispered. "She's all I have left." Morning sunlight streamed through the Venetian blinds, casting zebra-like shadows across the polished conference table where the hospital board members sat in tense silence. Coffee cups and manila folders dotted the glossy surface, untouched. The air conditioning hummed quietly in the background, doing little to ease the thick atmosphere of concern. "This situation needs to be contained," said Richard Matthews, the chief of medicine, his fingers drumming against his leather portfolio. "We can't afford another PR nightmare." Daniel Harrington sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the morning light. His expensive suit and commanding presence marked him as someone used to being in control. But today, something felt off. The veteran's case bothered him more than he cared to admit. The nurse clearly overstepped her boundaries. Another board member chimed in, "Going against the attending physician's orders." "And saved a man's life?" Daniel interrupted, surprising himself with the edge in his voice. He cleared his throat. "But yes, proper protocols should be followed." The discussion continued, voices rising and falling as they debated damage control. Daniel found his attention drawn to the window, where he could see families arriving for visiting hours, carrying flowers and get-well balloons. "We'll need statements prepared," Matthews continued. "Something about our commitment to patient care while maintaining professional standards." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Sandra, Daniel's assistant, poked her head in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a little girl wandering the halls near Mr. Cole's room." Security wasn't sure how to handle it. Daniel stood up. "I'll deal with this. Take 5, everyone." He walked briskly down the sterile hallway, his leather shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. He spotted her immediately, a small figure in a pink dress, her brown hair and slightly messy pigtails. She was standing by a window, holding something that glinted in the sunlight. "Hello there," Daniel said gently, kneeling to her level. "Are you lost?" The little girl turned, and Daniel felt an inexplicable jolt. Her eyes there was something hauntingly familiar about them. "I'm not lost," she said matter-of-factly. "I'm just waiting for Daddy to wake up again. The nice nurse said he needs lots of rest." Daniel noticed she was clutching a military medal. "That's a very special medal you have there." "It's Daddy's. He got it for being brave." She held it up proudly. "I'm Lily." "Nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Mr. Harrington." He smiled, trying to put her at ease. "Maybe we should find your dad's room." "I know who you are," Lily interrupted, her face brightening. "Mommy showed me your picture once. She said you're my daddy." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, grabbing the windowsill for support. What did you say?" "In Mommy's special box, there's a picture of you. She told me before she went to heaven that you're my real daddy, but she said I shouldn't tell anyone." Lily's face fell. Was it supposed to be a secret? Daniel's mind raced through memories he'd locked away years ago. Sarah Mitchell, a summer romance he'd ended when things got too serious. She'd tried to contact him afterward, but he'd been too busy, too focused on his career. The timing matched perfectly. "Your mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Her name was Sarah?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "She had pretty red hair like mine. But she got sick last year." Her small face grew serious. "Now I live with Daddy Ethan. He takes really good care of me." Daniel felt the world tilting on its axis. He looked more closely at Lily's features, her nose, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. How had he not seen it immediately? She was the spitting image of his late mother. With trembling legs, he walked to the window of Ethan Cole's room. The veteran lay still in the hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily beside him. This was the man who had stepped up, who had been raising his daughter, their daughter. Guilt crashed over him in waves. He'd abandoned Sarah, ignored her attempts to reach him, and now he discovered he had a granddaughter, one who'd already lost her mother and nearly lost her adoptive father due to his hospital's negligence. "Mr. Harrington?" Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Are you okay? You look sad." Daniel stared through the glass, watching Ethan's chest rise and fall. The man who'd nearly died because of institutional indifference Daniel himself had helped cultivate in his pursuit of profits and efficiency. The same kind of cold indifference he'd shown Sarah all those years ago. "I'm fine, Lily," he managed to say, though his voice cracked slightly. "We should get you back to your dad's room." "Okay." She slipped her small hand into his larger one, the gesture so natural and trusting that it made his heart ache. "Will you tell me a story about when you knew Mommy?" Daniel felt the weight of decades of choices pressing down on him as he stood there, holding his granddaughter's hand, watching the man who had become the father he should have been. The morning sunlight continued to stream through the windows, but now it felt like a spotlight, illuminating all his past mistakes. Through the glass, Ethan stirred slightly in his sleep, his face creased with pain, even in unconsciousness. The sight made Daniel's stomach turn. This man had nearly died because of the very system Daniel had helped build, a system that prioritized profits over people, efficiency over compassion. Lily squeezed his hand. "Daddy's going to be okay, right?" Daniel looked down at her hopeful face, seeing Sarah's trust reflected in those innocent eyes, the same trust he'd betrayed years ago. He felt frozen in place, torn between the corporate world he'd built his life around and the family he'd never known he had. The metal in Lily's hand caught the sunlight again, a sharp reminder of Ethan's service and sacrifice. Daniel watched his sleeping form through the window, the weight of revelation and responsibility pressing down on him like a physical force. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his priorities, his legacy, it all seemed to shift and realign around this singular moment. Daniel Harrington straightened his silk tie and took a deep breath before entering Ethan's hospital room. His polished leather shoes clicked against the linoleum floor as he approached the bed where the veteran lay, still pale but alert. "Mr. Cole," Daniel said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Daniel Harrington, from the hospital board. I wanted to personally check how you're doing after last night's incident." Ethan shifted in his bed, wincing slightly at the movement. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the visit." His voice was quiet but steady, his military training evident in his respectful tone. Still, something in Daniel's overly formal manner made him uneasy. "Where's Lily?" Daniel asked, trying to sound casual as his eyes scanned the room. "The nurses took her to get breakfast in the cafeteria," Ethan replied, watching Daniel carefully. "They've been very kind to her." Daniel nodded, his hands fidgeting with his suit jacket buttons. "Yes, well, we pride ourselves on compassionate care here at—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Nurse Julia entered, her dark curls escaping from her neat bun after what had clearly been a long shift. "Oh, Mr. Harrington, I didn't know you were here." Her tone was professional but cool. "Just checking on our patient," Daniel said quickly, taking a step back from the bed. Julia moved to check Ethan's vitals, her movements efficient but gentle. "You're lucky Dr. Harold was here last night," she said to Ethan, adjusting his IV line. "He's semi-retired now, but he still volunteers in the ER sometimes. He's the best cardiologist this hospital has ever had." "I'd like to thank him," Ethan said, "if he hadn't stepped in when he did. When he recognized your medal, he knew exactly who you were," Julia continued, shooting a pointed look at Daniel. "He said any man who earned that kind of decoration deserved the best care possible." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his expensive shoes squeaking against the floor. "Yes, well, about last night." "Mr. Harrington," Julia interrupted firmly, "I need to check Mr. Cole's bandages. Perhaps we could have some privacy?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Of course, Mr. Cole, I'll be in touch." He hurried from the room, the door clicking shut behind him. As soon as he was gone, Julia's professional smile faded. She leaned closer to Ethan, lowering her voice. "Listen to me carefully. The board is already trying to sweep this under the rug. That doctor who ignored you, he's got connections. They're saying you were just having an anxiety attack, that you overreacted." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know what a heart attack feels like. I've seen enough combat medics treat them in the field. I believe you. Julia said, checking that the door was still closed. "But they're going to try to dismiss this case. They care more about their reputation than doing what's right." She pulled a small notebook from her pocket. "I've documented everything from last night. Times, names, the doctor's exact words. We can't let them get away with this." Ethan reached for the medal that lay on his bedside table, his fingers closing around the cool metal, the same medal that had caught Dr. Harold's attention and saved his life. The medal he'd earned by never leaving a man behind. "I won't let them brush this aside," he said quietly, but with steel in his voice. "Not just for me, but for the next person who comes through those doors needing help. No one should have to go through what I did last night." Julia squeezed his arm. "You've got allies here, Mr. Cole. Dr. Harold will back you up, and so will I. Just be careful. The board has a lot of power, and they don't like their authority questioned." "I've faced worse odds," Ethan said, thinking of Lily's terrified face from the night before. "And I've got more to fight for now than ever." Julia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Get some rest. You'll need your strength." She adjusted his pillows and checked his monitors one last time before heading toward the door. As she left, Ethan could see Daniel Harrington through the window, pacing in the hallway. The powerful board member stopped, staring at Ethan's room with an expression of deep conflict on his face. His lips moved, forming words that Ethan couldn't hear through the glass. "I have to make this right." Ethan watched as Daniel finally turned and walked away, his shoulders heavy with what seemed like more than just concern over a potential lawsuit. Something else was going on here, something he couldn't quite figure out yet. But right now his eyelids were growing heavy and the medication was pulling him toward sleep. He kept his hand wrapped around his medal as he drifted off, its presence a reminder of everything he'd fought for in the past and everything he still had to fight for now. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hospital parking lot as Ethan Cole slowly made his way to his old pickup truck. Each step felt like lifting concrete blocks, but he forced himself forward, determined not to show weakness. Lily skipped beside him, her small hand wrapped tightly around his calloused fingers. "Easy there, sweetheart," he said, trying to mask his breathlessness. "Daddy needs to move a little slower today." Nurse Julia walked with them, pushing a wheelchair they'd insisted on bringing despite Ethan's protests. "Are you sure you don't want to use this, Mr. Cole?" "No shame in taking it easy. I've carried 100-pound packs through mountains," Ethan replied with a weak smile. "I can make it to my truck." When they reached the vehicle, Julia helped Ethan settle into the passenger seat while Lily climbed into the back. The nurse handed him a thick envelope of discharge papers and medication instructions. "Remember what Dr. Harold said. Complete rest for at least a week. Any chest pain, even slight, you come right back." Ethan nodded, though the thought of returning made his jaw clench. The memory of that first doctor's dismissive glare still burned in his mind. The drive home was quiet, with Mrs. Rodriguez from next door at the wheel. She'd insisted on picking them up after hearing about what happened from her son, who worked as an orderly at the hospital. News traveled fast in their small town. As they pulled into the driveway of Ethan's modest ranch house, he noticed several neighbors peering through their windows or pretending to work in their yards. Their concerned glances followed him as he slowly made his way to his front door. "Mi casa es su casa," Mrs. Rodriguez said, helping him inside. "I'll bring over some chicken soup later. My mother's recipe cures everything." Throughout the afternoon, more neighbors stopped by. Some brought casseroles, others just wanted to check on him. Ethan sat in his worn leather recliner, touched by their kindness but embarrassed by the attention. Lily appointed herself his official nurse, bringing him water and adjusting his blanket with serious dedication. Around dinner time, a group of veterans from his church arrived. Mike Thompson, who'd served in the same special ops unit, led the group into Ethan's living room. They gathered around his chair, their faces etched with concern and barely contained anger when Ethan recounted what happened in the ER. "This ain't right, brother," Mike said, his voice rough with emotion. "That doctor had no business treating you like that. You've saved more lives than he ever will." Pastor Dave, a Vietnam veteran himself, placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Let's pray together," he suggested. And the men formed a circle, heads bowed. "Lord," Pastor Dave began, "we lift up our brother Ethan to you. We thank you for sparing his life, for sending angels like Nurse Julia and Dr. Harold to help him. We pray for healing, for strength, and for justice." As the men prayed, their voices growing more passionate. Lily watched from the doorway of her bedroom. Her small face was serious, trying to understand the grown-up conversation she'd been overhearing all day. When the prayer ended, she padded across the room in her pink unicorn slippers and climbed onto the arm of Ethan's chair. "Daddy," she asked, her voice small but clear in the quiet room, "why don't they love you like I do?" The veterans fell silent. Ethan's throat tightened as he pulled his daughter into his arms, her question cutting straight to his heart. He blinked hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "Some people," he started, then had to clear his throat. "Some people just don't understand what it means to serve, baby girl. But that's okay, because I have you, and you love enough for everybody." Mike quickly wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "We all love your daddy, sweetheart. He's a hero. And we're going to make sure everybody knows it." The veterans stayed a while longer, making plans and promises, their voices low but determined. When they finally left, the house grew quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and the hum of the heating system. Ethan helped Lily get ready for bed, though every movement still caused twinges in his chest. He read her favorite story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom, then tucked her in with extra kisses. "I love you to the moon and back, Daddy," she whispered, already half asleep. "I love you to the stars and beyond, baby girl," he replied, their nightly ritual unchanged despite everything. Later, Ethan stood in the doorway of Lily's room, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. Her stuffed giraffe was tucked under one arm, and his medal of valor lay on her bedside table where she'd placed it to keep it safe. The moonlight streaming through her window made the bronze surface gleam. Looking at his sleeping daughter, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The shame and helplessness of the previous night transformed into quiet determination. He thought about other veterans who might face the same treatment, about other children who might have to watch their parents suffer needlessly. His military training had taught him to pick his battles wisely, but it had also taught him never to back down when the cause was just. For Lily's sake, for his fallen comrade's sake, he couldn't stay silent. He would fight this battle too, not with weapons, but with truth. He touched the familiar scar on his forearm, a reminder of battles past, and made a silent promise to his daughter. She deserved to grow up in a world where people who served their country were treated with dignity and respect, where her father's sacrifice meant something. Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, and Ethan adjusted her blanket. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he simply watched over his daughter's peaceful sleep, drawing strength from her innocent love and unwavering faith in him. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, staring at the formal complaint form. His handwriting wavered as he detailed that terrible night in the ER. Lily's crayons were scattered nearby. She was coloring pictures of hearts and nurses while he wrote. The morning light streamed through their small kitchen window, warming the papers beneath his trembling hands. "Daddy, can I draw on your paper too?" Lily asked, reaching for his form with a red crayon. "Not this one, sweetheart," Ethan said gently, managing a smile. "But maybe you can draw me something special for later?" She nodded and returned to her artwork, humming softly. Ethan's chest tightened, not from pain this time, but from love and determination. He had to do this right. For her. 2 hours later, Ethan straightened his tie in the hospital lobby mirror. He'd worn his best suit, the one from Sarah's funeral. It still hung loose on his frame, but it was all he had. The manila envelope containing his complaint felt heavy in his hands. The hospital board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the administrative wing. As Ethan approached the double doors, he saw Daniel Harrington pacing outside, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Mr. Cole," Daniel said, his voice rough. "A moment, please." Before Ethan could respond, the doors opened, and a secretary ushered them into the boardroom. 12 faces turned to stare at them. The hospital's elite, seated around a massive mahogany table. Dr. Stevens, the arrogant ER doctor who had dismissed Ethan's symptoms, sat near the head, wearing a smug expression. "Mr. Cole," the board chairman began, "we understand you have a complaint to file. However, before we proceed—" "Actually," Daniel interrupted, standing suddenly. His hands gripped the back of his chair. "There's something I need to address first." The room fell silent. Daniel's knuckles whitened on the chair. "The night Mr. Cole was brought in," Daniel continued, his voice shaking, "his daughter said something to me. Something that changes everything. He paused, looking directly at Ethan. She told me her mother, your late wife Sarah, said I was her daddy. After investigation, I've confirmed that Sarah and we had a relationship years ago, before she met you. The timing suggests. He swallowed hard. Lily could be my granddaughter. Gasps echoed around the table. Ethan felt the room spin. His mind flashed to Sarah, to all their conversations about Lily's biological father, to Sarah's reluctance to discuss her past. This is preposterous. Dr. Stevens shot to his feet. This is clearly a ploy for money. Cole probably put the girl up to it. Sit down, David, Daniel snapped. I have DNA tests to prove the connection. Sarah was my daughter, and I abandoned her when she needed me most. I won't make the same mistake with my granddaughter. The board chairman's face had turned purple. Mr. Harrington, this is highly irregular. The implications for the hospital are exactly why we need to address this now, Daniel cut in. This isn't just about one veteran being denied care. It's about systemic failures that nearly killed my granddaughter's father. Chaos erupted around the table. Board members shouted over each other. Papers flew, and Dr. Stevens kept yelling about fabricated stories and unstable veterans. Mr. Cole is clearly manipulating the situation, Dr. Stevens sneered. He's milking sympathy, using his status as a veteran. I have the medical records, Ethan said quietly, but his voice carried. The room fell silent again. And security footage. And witnesses. This isn't about sympathy or status. It's about right and wrong. Through the boardroom's glass walls, camera flashes suddenly lit up the corridor. Reporters had somehow gotten wind of the meeting. This is a disaster, the chairman muttered. We need to contain this immediately. No, Daniel said firmly. No more covering things up. I've already called a press conference. Dr. Stevens lunged forward. You can't do this. That night was an aberration. Cole was acting erratically. My daughter almost lost her father because of your negligence. Daniel's voice thundered across the room. And I almost lost the only family I have left. The board dissolved into angry arguments. Some members were already calling their lawyers. Others were demanding Daniel's immediate resignation. Ethan stood slowly, gathering his papers. This wasn't just about his complaint anymore. It was about exposing a system that valued reputation over human lives. The boardroom doors burst open as reporters pushed their way in. Cameras flashed. Questions flew through the air like arrows. Mr. Cole, is it true you were denied critical care? Mr. Harrington, are you confirming a family connection? Dr. Stevens, how do you respond to allegations of negligence? Ethan made his way through the chaos to the door. He needed to get home to Lily. As he stepped into the corridor, he heard small footsteps running toward him. Daddy! Lily broke away from Nurse Julia, who had been watching her, and ran into his arms. He lifted her up, ignoring the protest in his chest. Is everything okay? Lily whispered in his ear. Camera flashes exploded around them as Ethan carried his daughter through the corridor. Reporters shouted more questions. Microphones appeared in their faces, but Ethan held Lily close and kept walking. Behind them, they could hear Daniel's voice rising above the commotion. The truth will come out today. All of it. Ethan pushed through the hospital's main doors. Lily's small hand wrapped tightly in his. The afternoon sun blinded them momentarily as more reporters swarmed forward, their cameras capturing father and daughter walking away from the chaos they had unleashed. The sweet aroma of pancakes filled the modest kitchen as Ethan flipped another golden disc onto Lily's plate. She sat at their worn wooden table, swinging her legs and humming while drawing pictures with her favorite blue crayon. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Extra syrup, please, Daddy, Lily chirped, holding up her plate. Ethan drizzled maple syrup in a heart shape, just the way she liked it. There you go, Princess. Just like I promised. The phone rang again. The fifth time that morning. Ethan glanced at the caller ID and let it go to voicemail. The local news station had been persistent since dawn. Why don't you answer, Daddy? Lily asked between bites, syrup dotting her chin. Sometimes grown-ups need quiet time to think, Ethan explained, wiping her face with a napkin. Especially during breakfast with their favorite daughter. The phone started up again. This time, Ethan recognized the number of his old unit commander. He picked up, his voice tired but respectful. Sir? Cole, we've got your 6, the familiar voice barked. Veterans United Legal Defense is ready to take your case. Pro bono means free of charge, son. Ethan's throat tightened. I appreciate that, sir, but... No buts, Cole. What happened to you isn't right. We take care of our own. As Ethan wrote down the lawyer's contact information, Lily finished her pancakes and carried her plate to the sink, standing on her tiptoes to reach. The doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, Ethan saw Pastor James on the porch, his kind face creased with concern. Ethan opened the door, letting in the warm morning air. Thought you might need a friend this morning, Pastor James said, holding up a paper bag. Sarah baked her famous banana bread. Pastor James! Lily ran to hug him around the knees. They settled in the living room, Lily coloring nearby while the adults talked in low voices. Pastor James listened intently as Ethan described that night in the ER, the dismissive doctor, the pain, the fear of leaving Lily alone. The Lord puts us in positions to speak truth to power, Pastor James said, leaning forward. You have a voice, Ethan. Use it not just for yourself, but for others who might face the same treatment. Ethan rubbed his chest unconsciously. I keep thinking about other vets who might not have been as lucky as me, who might not have had a nurse willing to defy orders. Pastor James nodded. That's why you need to fight this. Let's pray together. They bowed their heads as Pastor James's steady voice filled the room. Lord, give Ethan strength and wisdom. Guide his path toward justice. Protect him and little Lily as they face this challenge. Amen. Amen. Lily echoed solemnly from her coloring spot. The rest of the morning was a blur of activity. Ethan called the veteran's lawyer, who asked him to document everything. He dug out his discharge papers and medical records. Nurse Julia had slipped him a copy of his ER intake forms before he left the hospital. They showed clear signs of negligence. The phone kept ringing. Veterans groups offered support. Local news wanted interviews. Church members called with prayers and offers of help. Ethan carefully screened each call, protecting Lily from the growing storm around them. By afternoon, his kitchen table was covered with papers, medical records, witness statements, hospital policies. The Veterans Organization had emailed him similar cases, showing a pattern of discrimination against service members at several hospitals. Daddy? Lily's small voice broke through his concentration. Are you fixing the hospital so they'll be nice to everyone? Ethan pulled her into a tight hug. That's exactly what we're trying to do, baby girl. As evening fell, Ethan went through their bedtime routine. Bath, pajamas, story time. But tonight felt different, heavier, more important somehow. In Lily's room, decorated with twinkling fairy lights and crayon masterpieces, Ethan reached for his service medal. It had been sitting on his dresser since that night in the ER. This medal means a lot to Daddy, he explained, running his thumb over the worn medal. It reminds me to be brave, even when things are scary. Lily touched it reverently. Like when you saved those other soldiers? That's right. Ethan carefully pinned the medal to Lily's little court bulletin board, right next to her bed. The medal caught the soft light from her night lamp. Now, it can watch over both of us while we sleep. Will it keep the bad dreams away? Lily asked, snuggling under her princess comforter. Ethan kissed her forehead. It reminds us that we're strong, even in our dreams, just like we're stronger together. I love you, Daddy, Lily murmured, already drifting off. Love you too, Princess. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching the metal gleam in the dim light. It wasn't just metal and ribbon anymore. It was a symbol of everything they were fighting for. Justice, truth, the promise that service and sacrifice still meant something in this world. He closed her door softly, leaving it open just a crack, the way she liked it. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more calls, more decisions. But tonight, his medal stood guard over his greatest treasure, reminding them both that courage comes in many forms. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ethan's front lawn as news vans lined the quiet suburban street. Inside, Lily stood on her tiptoes by the living room window, her small fingers pulling back the cream-colored curtain just enough to peek through. There's so many people out there, Daddy, she whispered, her blue eyes wide with concern. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, trying to project calm despite his own nervousness. The house wasn't much, just a modest 3-bedroom with fading white paint and window boxes full of petunias. But it was their sanctuary. Now it felt like they were under siege. It's okay, sweetheart, he assured her, though his throat felt tight. "They just want to hear our story." The doorbell rang, making Lily jump. Through the frosted glass, they could see the silhouettes of a news crew waiting on the porch. Ethan took a deep breath, straightened his collar, and opened the door. A young reporter with kind eyes introduced herself as Sarah Chen from Channel 8 News. Her cameraman stood respectfully back, equipment at the ready but not intrusive. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Cole," she said warmly, then knelt to Lily's eye level. "And you must be Lily. I love your butterfly clips." Lily smiled shyly, moving closer to Ethan's leg but giving a little wave. They set up in the living room, where family photos lined the walls and Lily's stuffed animals had permanent spots on the couch. Sarah sat across from Ethan while Lily curled up beside him, clutching her favorite teddy bear. "Tell us about your experience at Memorial Hospital," Sarah began gently. Ethan's hand found Lily's as he spoke. "I served 3 tours in special operations. We faced things most people can't imagine. But nothing scared me more than collapsing in that ER, knowing my daughter might lose her only parent." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "In combat, we never asked about someone's race or religion when they needed help. My team, we were like brothers. Hispanic, black, white, Muslim, Christian, none of that mattered. We saved each other, period." Tears welled in his eyes as he described his unit. "Rodriguez would give you his last drop of water. Williams took a bullet pushing me out of the way. Thompson carried me 2 miles when I was hit, even though he was smaller than me. That's what real healthcare should look like. Helping everyone, no questions asked." Sarah leaned forward, clearly moved. "And instead, you were dismissed? That doctor." Ethan shook his head, choosing his words carefully with Lily present. He didn't see a person. He didn't see a father. He just saw what he wanted to see. The interview continued as Ethan shared more details about that night. Lily occasionally chimed in with devastating innocence. "I was so scared when Daddy fell down, and the mean doctor wouldn't listen to me." As the crew was packing up, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they saw neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door carried a large pot of her famous chicken soup. The Williamses brought fresh-baked bread. Pastor Mike stood with several church members holding signs that read, "Support our veterans," and "Justice for Ethan." Ethan's throat tightened as he opened the door. The community he'd quietly lived among for years had transformed into a wall of support. Mrs. Rodriguez pushed past the reporters, pressing the warm soup container into his hands. "You took care of our sons overseas," she said firmly, her accent thick with emotion. "Now we take care of you." Pastor Mike stepped forward, his weathered face serious. "We're holding a prayer vigil tonight, son. This whole town stands with you." More neighbors arrived, bearing casseroles, desserts, and words of encouragement. The Chen family from the corner store brought bags of groceries. Mr. Thompson, a fellow veteran, arrived with his entire motorcycle club. Their bikes lined up in solidarity along the street. Lily watched in amazement as their living room filled with food and friends. She tugged on Ethan's sleeve, whispering loud enough for others to hear, "Daddy, look how many people love us." The news crew captured it all. The spontaneous gathering of neighbors, the prayers, the hugs, and the tears. Sarah Chen's final shot showed Lily being lifted onto Mr. Thompson's shoulders while the motorcycle club members cheered, their leather vests decorated with military patches glinting in the sunday. For the first time since that terrible night in the ER, Ethan felt the weight on his chest lighten. Here was the America he'd fought for. People of all backgrounds coming together, standing up for what was right. As he watched Lily laugh atop Mr. Thompson's shoulders, holding a sign too big for her little hands, he saw hope blooming like his wife's beloved petunias in the window boxes. Mrs. Rodriguez ladled out soup while Pastor Mike organized a prayer circle right there in the front yard. The news cameras captured every moment of this impromptu celebration of community, every face shining with purpose and love. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he opened the crisp white envelope at his kitchen table. The formal notice inside stated that the hospital board would hold a hearing in 3 days to address his complaint of medical negligence. The black text seemed to swim before his eyes as memories of that terrifying night in the ER flooded back. "What's that, Daddy?" Lily asked, peering over her bowl of cereal. Ethan managed a reassuring smile. Just some grown-up paperwork, sweetheart. Hey, finish up your breakfast. We need to head over to Uncle Mike's place soon. Mike Harrison, his former squad leader, had offered his home as a meeting place for the veterans helping with Ethan's case. The modest, ranch-style house became their informal headquarters, filling with the familiar faces of brothers-in-arms who'd stood beside him in far worse situations than this. By mid-morning, the living room buzzed with activity. 6 veterans gathered around Mike's coffee table, now covered with legal documents and notebooks. Their pro bono lawyer, Sarah Chen, sat in an armchair reviewing hospital policies while 2 other vets made phone calls to potential witnesses. The key is preparation, Sarah explained, adjusting her reading glasses. We need to present a clear timeline of events and demonstrate a pattern of negligence. Your testimony needs to be precise, but emotional enough to connect with the board members as human beings. Ethan nodded, taking careful notes. Lily sat cross-legged on the carpet nearby, coloring quietly in her notebook. She looked up occasionally to give her father encouraging smiles that made his heart ache with love and determination. A soft knock at the back door interrupted their strategy session. Nurse Julia Morales slipped in, carrying a thick manila envelope and looking nervously over her shoulder. "I can't stay long," she whispered, setting the envelope on the table. "But these documents, they show similar incidents over the past year. Cases where veterans and minorities received delayed or inadequate care." The hospital buried the complaints. Sarah quickly leafed through the papers, her eyes widening. "This is exactly what we needed. Julia, you're taking a huge risk bringing these to us." The nurse squared her shoulders. "Someone has to stand up for what's right. That night with Ethan, it wasn't the first time I've seen good people ignored or dismissed. I just couldn't stay silent anymore." Ethan stood and clasped her hand. "Thank you. I know what this could cost you." "Just promise me you'll make them listen," Julia replied, squeezing his hand before hurrying out the back door. The afternoon stretched into evening as they built their case. Lily eventually dozed off on the couch, clutching her father's metal while the adults worked in hushed voices around her. A text message buzzed on Ethan's phone. "Need to speak with you privately. Important, Daniel Harrington." After arranging to meet at a quiet diner nearby, Ethan asked Mike to watch Lily for an hour. The bell above the diner's door chimed as he entered, spotting Daniel in a corner booth away from other customers. The wealthy board member looked decidedly uncomfortable in the humble setting, his expensive suit out of place among the vinyl seats and laminated menus. His face carried the weight of sleepless nights. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniel began, stirring his untouched coffee. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about this situation. About Lily. About everything." Ethan sat silently, waiting. "I can make this go away quietly," Daniel continued. "Full medical coverage for you and Lily, plus a generous settlement. In exchange, we handle this internally. No public hearing, no media circus. I'll even step down from the board to avoid any complications regarding our connection to Lily." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Ethan processed the offer. He thought of Lily's mother, of all the secrets and pain that had led to this moment. Finally, he spoke. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, this isn't about money. It's not even about you and me, or our connection to Lily. This is about every veteran who walks through those hospital doors. Every person who gets dismissed or ignored because someone decides they don't matter." Daniel's face tightened. "You don't understand the complications." "I understand perfectly," Ethan cut in, his voice firm but controlled. "I understand that you're trying to protect your reputation and the hospital's image, but I won't be bought off. Those documents we received today, they show this isn't an isolated incident. People have died because of this culture of negligence. It has to stop." He stood up, placing both hands on the table. "You want to do right by Lily? Then help us change things. Stand up and tell the truth at that hearing. Be the kind of grandfather she could be proud of." Leaving Daniel with those words, Ethan drove home through the quiet streets. He found Lily still asleep on Mike's couch, her face peaceful in the soft lamplight. Carefully, he gathered her in his arms, thanking Mike before carrying her home. In her own bed, Lily stirred as he tucked the covers around her. "Daddy, did you win yet?" Ethan smoothed her hair back and kissed her forehead. "Not yet, baby girl. But I promise you something. I'm going to fight. Not just for us, but for everyone who needs someone to stand up for them. That's what your daddy does, remember? Like when you saved people in the war?" she asked sleepily. "That's right," he whispered, his throat tight with emotion. "Now get some sleep. I love you more than anything." "Love you too, Daddy," Lily murmured, drifting off with her small hand, still clutching his medal. Ethan sat beside her bed for a long moment, drawing strength from her innocent faith in him. In 3 days, he would face the hospital board. In 3 days, he would give voice to everyone who had ever been silenced. The weight of that responsibility settled over him like a familiar rucksack, heavy but necessary, a burden he was trained to carry. The morning sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains as Ethan stood before his mirror, adjusting the collar of his faded military uniform. Years of careful storage had preserved its shape, but the fabric showed signs of wear, much like the man who wore it. His fingers traced the familiar creases, each one holding memories of battles fought far from home. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her best blue dress, her dark hair neatly braided, holding his medal of valor in both hands as if it were made of glass. "Can I help you put it on?" Ethan knelt down to her level, his knees creaking slightly. "Of course, sweetheart." His voice was gentle, masking the nervous energy coursing through his body. Lily's tiny fingers worked with careful determination as she pinned the medal to his chest. Her hands trembled slightly, and Ethan could see tears forming in her eyes. "Are you scared, Daddy?" "A little," he admitted, pulling her into a hug. "But being scared is okay when you're doing the right thing." She nodded against his chest, her small arms wrapped tightly around him. "Like when you saved those other soldiers?" "Just like that." He pulled back to look at her, straightening her hair ribbon. "Remember what we talked about? You just need to tell the truth about what happened that night." The drive to the hospital was quiet, save for Lily's soft humming from the back seat. The parking lot was already filling with supporters, veterans in their service caps, church members holding signs, and local residents who had rallied to their cause. Nurse Julia waited at the entrance, her face lighting up when she saw them. "You look very handsome, Mr. Cole," she said, giving Lily a warm smile. "And you look beautiful, sweetheart." Inside, the hospital's main conference room had been transformed for the hearing. Long tables formed a U-shape where the board members would sit, with chairs arranged in rows for spectators. Ethan's heart pounded as he recognized the arrogant ER doctor seated near the front, pointedly avoiding eye contact. Daniel Harrington sat among the board members, his face a mask of professional neutrality. But when Lily walked past, his composure cracked slightly, his eyes following her movement. "The hearing will now come to order," announced the board chairman, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Cole, please step forward and share your account of the events on the night in question." Ethan stood, squeezing Lily's hand once before walking to the podium. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on him. He took a deep breath, his hand unconsciously touching the medal on his chest. "I came to this hospital believing in its promise of care," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I came here as a father, trying to stay alive for my daughter. Instead, I found myself fighting for my life while being dismissed and ignored." He recounted that terrible night, the searing chest pain, the desperate drive to the ER, the moment he collapsed. His voice grew thick with emotion as he described hearing Lily's screams for help while his vision darkened. "In combat, we never left a man behind," Ethan continued, his words carrying to every corner of the hushed room. "We didn't care about race, religion, or background. When someone needed help, we helped. That's what I believe medicine was about too." Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Ethan described the ER doctor's dismissive attitude. In the audience, veterans nodded in recognition of their own similar experiences. "If not for Nurse Julia's courage and Dr. Harold's compassion, I wouldn't be standing here today," Ethan said, gesturing to where they Saturday. They remembered their oath when others forgot it. When he finished, the chairman called Lily forward. She walked to the front with small, determined steps, her patent leather shoes clicking on the floor. Someone brought her a chair so she could reach the microphone. "Can you tell us what happened that night, Lily?" the chairman asked gently. Lily's voice was clear and innocent. "Daddy was hurting really bad, but he still made sure I had my coat on before we left home." Her lower lip trembled. "When we got here, he fell down. I was so scared. I kept asking the doctor to help my daddy, but he wouldn't listen to me." Tears began rolling down her cheeks. "I held Daddy's special medal and prayed really hard. Then the nice nurse came and got another doctor who helped him." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just wanted someone to help my daddy like he helps other people. A profound silence fell over the room. Several board members dabbed at their eyes. Even the ER doctor looked down at his hands, his arrogance finally cracking. Spontaneous applause broke out when Lily finished speaking. She ran back to Ethan, who scooped her up in his arms, holding her close as more people stood to clap. The sound swelled, filling the room with a wave of support and emotion. The chairman had to rap his gavel several times to restore order. When the room finally quieted, Ethan sat down with Lily in his lap, her small hand clutching his medal. For the first time since this ordeal began, he felt a glimmer of real hope. Looking at the moved expressions on the board members' faces, seeing Daniel Harrington's determined nod, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, justice would prevail. As the board prepared to deliberate, Ethan held Lily close, drawing strength from her pure heart and unwavering love. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting warm light across the room, as father and daughter waited together for the decision that could change everything. The morning paper landed on Ethan's front porch with a soft thud. The bold headline caught his eye immediately. Veteran Dad brings hospital to its knees. Below it was a photo of him in his military uniform from yesterday's hearing, standing tall with Lily beside him. The story spread across the entire front page, complete with quotes from community members and veterans groups demanding justice. Ethan picked up the paper, his hands trembling slightly. He'd never wanted to be in the spotlight, but here he was. The article detailed his testimony, describing how the packed boardroom had fallen silent during his account of that terrifying night in the ER. They'd printed Lily's words too, her simple truth about begging for help while the doctor walked away. Inside, Lily was already at the kitchen table, pouring far too much syrup on her pancakes. "Daddy, look, we're famous!" She pointed at their picture with sticky fingers. "That we are, sweetheart." Ethan couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. The phone started ringing again. It had barely stopped since yesterday's hearing. This time, he let it go to voicemail. Today would be different. Today would be just for them. Outside, car horns honked as people drove past their house. Some neighbors stood in their yards, waving and cheering. Mrs. Henderson from next door walked over with a fresh apple pie, her face beaming with pride. "You showed them, Ethan?" she said, pressing the warm pie into his hands. "The whole town's talking about it. That hospital board won't know what hit them." Throughout the morning, more people stopped by. Veterans in their service caps, church members with casseroles. Even the local diner owner brought breakfast sandwiches. The front yard slowly filled with well-wishers, some holding handmade signs reading "Justice for Ethan" and "Support our veterans." But Ethan noticed the worry in some of their eyes, the way they glanced at the hospital up on the hill. The board members were powerful people, with deep connections in the community. This fight was far from over. By mid-morning, Ethan needed an escape from all the attention. "Hey, Princess," he called to Lily. "How about we go to the park?" Her face lit up instantly. "Can I wear my special sneakers, the ones that light up?" "Of course you can." He helped her tie the sparkly laces, then grabbed a few snacks and water bottles. The park was only a few blocks away, but it felt like stepping into another world. The familiar crunch of wood chips under their feet and the squeak of swing chains brought a sense of normalcy. Here, they weren't the father and daughter from the newspaper headlines. They were just Ethan and Lily, enjoying a beautiful day together. Lily ran straight for the swings, her favorite spot. "Push me, Daddy. I want to go super high." Ethan positioned himself behind her and gave a gentle push. Each time she swung back, her giggles grew louder. The sound of her laughter was medicine for his soul, washing away the tension of the past few days. "Higher!" she squealed, pumping her legs just like he'd taught her. "I want to touch the clouds," he obliged, pushing a little stronger. The autumn breeze caught her hair, making it stream behind her like a banner. For a moment, he could almost pretend everything was fine, that they were just a regular family enjoying a regular day at the park. Other families were there too, their children racing around the playground. A few parents nodded in recognition, but nobody approached them. They seemed to understand that this was private time, sacred space. After the swings, Lily led him on an adventure through the playground equipment. They crossed the wobbly bridge, pretending it was over a river full of alligators. They climbed the rope ladder while imagining they were scaling a mountain. At the top of the slide, Lily declared herself queen of the castle. "Then I guess that makes me the royal guard." Ethan played along, bowing dramatically. "No, Daddy, "You're the king," she giggled, scooting forward on the slide. "Come on, let's go down together." He squeezed onto the slide behind her, his long legs awkwardly hanging over the sides. Together they pushed off, sliding down with shared laughter. At the bottom, Ethan scooped her up in his arms, spinning her around and around. "Again!" Lily shouted, her arms stretched wide like airplane wings. "Spin me more." Ethan lifted her higher, turning in circles until they were both dizzy with joy. Lily's laughter rang out across the playground, pure and innocent. Other parents smiled at their display, probably seeing what Ethan felt, the simple, perfect happiness of a father and daughter at play. They collapsed onto the grass, still giggling, watching clouds drift overhead. Lily pointed out shapes, a dragon, a flower, a heart. Ethan added his own observations, marveling at her imagination. A butterfly fluttered past, and Lily jumped up to chase it. Ethan watched her dance after the delicate creature, her light-up shoes flashing with each step. In moments like these, she looked so much like her mother, it made his heart ache. When the butterfly finally flew too high to follow, Lily returned to his side, slightly out of breath but grinning. "Did you see how close I got, Daddy? I almost caught it." "You sure did, Princess." He pulled her into another hug, lifting her high above his head. She spread her arms again, pretending to fly. "Look at me! I'm a butterfly, too!" Her joyful shrieks filled the air as he spun her one last time. The afternoon sun warmed their faces as they played, making the rest of the world feel distant and unimportant. Here in their bubble of happiness, there were no hospital boards, no headlines, no battles to fight. There was just love, laughter, and the precious gift of time together. The harsh pounding on his front door jolted Ethan awake. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom window as the knocking grew more insistent. He glanced at his clock. 6:47 a.m. "Coming," he called out, pulling on a t-shirt. He hurried down the hallway, checking that the noise hadn't woken Lily. When he opened the door, he found Jake and Marcus from his veteran support group on his porch. Their faces were grim, and Jake clutched several newspapers in his trembling hands. "Brother, we got trouble," Jake said, pushing past him into the house. Marcus followed, shutting the door quietly behind them. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, following them to his kitchen table. Jake spread out the newspapers, different publications, but all with similar blazing headlines. "Special Ops Veterans Violent Past Exposed," and "Questions Arise About Cole's Mental Stability," and "Hospital Questions Veteran's State of Mind." Ethan's stomach dropped as he scanned the articles. Classified details about his missions had been leaked, but they were twisted, distorted into something unrecognizable. Operations where he'd saved his entire unit were portrayed as reckless endangerment. The time he'd stayed behind to protect civilian families was painted as disobeying direct orders. "That ER doctor," Marcus growled. "He got his hands on your classified file somehow. Been feeding it to the press all morning." Ethan sank into a kitchen chair, his legs suddenly weak. How did he even get access to those files? "We think someone on the board helped him," Jake said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "They're trying to discredit you, brother. Make you look unstable." The kitchen phone rang, making them all jump. Ethan let it go to voicemail. A reporter's voice filled the room. "Mr. Cole, this is Sarah Mitchell from Channel 8 News. We'd like your comment on the allegations about your military service." He yanked the phone cord from the wall. "Daddy," Lily's small voice came from the hallway. "Why are Uncle Jake and Uncle Marcus here so early?" Ethan forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. How about some breakfast?" But everything wasn't fine. As the morning wore on, more veterans arrived. They gathered in Ethan's living room, watching news coverage spiral out of control. Military psychologists who'd never met him speculated about PTSD. Former commanders were ambushed by reporters, their no comments twisted into damning silence. By noon, Ethan's cell phone was flooded with missed calls and texts. His email inbox overflowed. Reporters camped outside his house, forcing him to close all the blinds. He sent Lily to play in her room, not wanting her to see the chaos. At 2 p.m., his lawyer called. The hospital board was holding an emergency session. They were reconsidering their position in light of new concerns about Mr. Cole's mental fitness. "They're using my service against me," Ethan said quietly after hanging up. The veterans in his living room exchanged dark looks. "We'll fight this," Jake insisted. We all know the truth. But the damage was mounting. By evening, former supporters were distancing themselves. The church group canceled their prayer vigil. Local businesses took down their "We Stand With Ethan" signs. The media narrative had shifted from heroic father to troubled veteran. As darkness fell, his friends reluctantly left, promising to return tomorrow with a plan. Ethan stood at his window, watching them drive away. Through gaps in the blinds, he could see news vans still parked along his street, their satellite dishes reaching into the night sky like accusing fingers. He checked on Lily, finding her already asleep. Her small face was peaceful, unaware of how their world had crumbled in a single day. On her bedside table, his medal caught the dim light from her nightlight. Carefully, he picked up the medal. The weight of it felt different now, heavier, tainted. He carried it downstairs to his kitchen table and sat alone in the dark. The metal's surface reflected the weak moonlight filtering through the windows. Each groove and edge represented sacrifice, honor, brotherhood. Now those same marks seemed to mock him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, running his thumb over the cool metal. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I tried to fight for us, but I failed." The silence of his kitchen offered no comfort. Outside, a camera flash occasionally lit up his windows, vultures waiting for their next shot at him. His medals, his service, his sacrifices, all twisted into weapons against him. And somewhere in that hospital, the doctor who'd nearly let him die was probably sleeping soundly, satisfied that he'd destroyed the troublemaker who dared to challenge the system. The metal grew blurry in his vision. He blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. But in the darkness of his kitchen, the truth was unavoidable. His reputation was shredded, his credibility destroyed. The very service he'd given to his country had been turned against him and his daughter. "I failed you," he whispered again to the empty room, the metal cold and heavy in his hand. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ethan's kitchen floor, but he couldn't feel its warmth. His phone buzzed for the 20th time that morning. Without looking, he pressed the power button until the screen went dark. The silence felt heavy, pressing down on his shoulders like a physical weight. Yesterday's newspaper lay spread across the kitchen table, its bold headlines screaming accusations. Special Ops veteran's reckless past revealed. Questions arise about Cole's mental stability. Hospital board questions veteran's credibility. Each word felt like another nail in the coffin of his reputation. Lily's small feet padded down the stairs, and Ethan quickly folded the paper, stuffing it under a stack of mail. She appeared in the doorway wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas, her brown hair tangled from sleep. "Can we make pancakes, Daddy?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Like you always do?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Sure, baby girl," he managed, though the thought of food made his stomach turn. Lily dragged her step stool to the counter, while Ethan mechanically gathered ingredients. His hands trembled slightly as he measured flour into a bowl. Lily watched him with worried eyes, far too perceptive for her 7 years. "You forgot the cinnamon," she said quietly. "You never forget the cinnamon." Ethan nodded, reaching for the spice jar. As he sprinkled it in, memories flooded back, making these same pancakes with Sarah, his late wife, Lily, giggling as they danced around the kitchen. Now the kitchen felt cold, despite the morning sunday. When the pancakes were done, Lily carefully arranged them on 2 plates, adding extra syrup to Ethan's portion. "The way you like them," she said, pushing the plate toward him. Ethan sat at the table, staring at the golden stack. Each bite felt like sawdust in his mouth. He managed 3 small forkfuls before setting down his utensils, his appetite completely gone. Lily watched him pick at his food, her own plate barely touched. "The TV people were mean," she said suddenly. "They don't know you like I do." Ethan's chest tightened. He tried to shield her from the news coverage, but children at school must have talked. The thought of Lily hearing those terrible things about him made him sick. "They said bad things about when you were a soldier," she continued, her voice small. "But you told me soldiers help people. That's what you did, right?" The memories came rushing back. Missions where he'd risked everything to save his fellow soldiers, regardless of their background or beliefs. The leaked files had twisted those acts of courage into reckless endangerment, painting him as unstable and dangerous. "Yes, baby," he whispered. "That's what I did." Lily slid off her chair and disappeared into the living room. Ethan heard her tiny feet on the stairs, then back down again. When she returned, she held his Special Ops medal in her small hands. She approached him slowly, the metal gleaming in the morning light. With deliberate care, she placed it in his palm, closing his fingers around the cool metal. "Daddy," she said, her voice carrying that startling wisdom that sometimes emerged. "You always save people. Now it's your turn to save us." The simple truth in her words broke something inside him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he stared at the metal in his hand. The same metal that had caught Dr. Harold's attention that night in the ER. The same metal that had helped save his life. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, and Ethan pulled her close, his tears falling into her tangled hair. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. Her small body felt so fragile in his arms, yet her spirit held more strength than all the armies he'd ever served with. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered against his neck. "You can't give up." Ethan held her tighter, his tears flowing freely now. Through the blur, he looked at the metal in his hand, not as a symbol of past glory, but as a reminder of who he was at his core. Someone who never abandoned those who needed him. His little girl needed him now. The other veterans who'd been mistreated needed him. Even those who would come after them needed him to stand up and fight. They sat there in the morning light, father and daughter, the half-eaten pancakes growing cold on their plates. Lily kept her arms wrapped around his neck, as if holding him together with her pure love and faith. And maybe she was. Daniel Harrington sat alone in his mahogany-paneled study, the morning light filtering through heavy curtains. In his trembling hands, he held a worn photograph, a young woman with Lily's same bright eyes and gentle smile. His daughter. The one he turned away decades ago when she'd gotten pregnant, too concerned with his reputation to stand by her. The guilt pressed down on his chest like a physical weight. He traced the edge of the photo with his finger, remembering her last visit to his office. She'd been barely 20, tears streaming down her face as she begged him to acknowledge her child. Instead, he'd written a check and asked her never to contact him again. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." On his desk lay the morning's newspapers, their headlines screaming accusations about Ethan's mental state. Daniel knew the truth. He'd seen the actual military records. The doctor's leaked version was deliberately twisted, designed to destroy a good man's reputation. A man who'd raised Daniel's granddaughter with more love and courage than he'd ever shown his own child. Daniel reached for his phone, dialing his PR team. "Schedule a press conference. Immediately." His voice was firm now, resolved. "And get me every piece of evidence about the hospital board's corruption. Everything." Within hours, news vans crowded the hospital parking lot. Reporters jostled for position as Daniel approached the podium, his usual commanding presence softened by something new: humility. "My name is Daniel Harrington," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "And I have a confession to make." He paused, pulling out the photograph. "This is my daughter. 25 years ago, I turned her away when she needed me most. Today, her daughter, my granddaughter, is 7 years old. Her name is Lily Cole." Gasps rippled through the audience. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. "Lily's father is Ethan Cole, a decorated special operations veteran who nearly died in our emergency room due to criminal negligence. When the truth threatened to emerge, this hospital, my hospital, chose to destroy his reputation rather than face its failures." He lifted a thick folder. "I have here documented evidence of systematic corruption within our board. Years of covered-up incidents, falsified records, lives endangered to protect profits." His hands were steady now as he named names, detailed dates, exposed every dark secret he'd helped hide. "As of this moment, I am donating $50 million to establish a new veterans healthcare initiative. Every board member who participated in this cover-up will resign. The doctor who leaked falsified records will face legal consequences." Reporters shouted questions, but Daniel raised his hand for silence. His voice softened as he spoke directly to the cameras. "Ethan, if you're watching, I failed your wife. I failed you. But most unforgivably, I failed Lily. You've been the father she deserves, the man I should have been. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope this truth can begin to restore your honor." In his modest living room across town, Ethan sat frozen on his couch, watching the broadcast in disbelief. Lily curled against his side, her small hand wrapped around his medal. On the screen, Daniel continued his confession, methodically dismantling every false accusation against Ethan. The truth poured out like a cleansing flood. How the board had pressured staff to minimize care for veterans, how they'd buried complaints, how they'd orchestrated the smear campaign against Ethan. With each revelation, Daniel's voice grew more determined, as if each admission lifted a weight from his soul. "Finally," Daniel said, his eyes glistening, "I want to announce my immediate resignation from the hospital board. In my place, I am establishing an oversight committee led by veterans and healthcare advocates. Never again will profit come before patient care. Never again will we abandon those who served." The press conference exploded into chaos as reporters scrambled for follow-up questions. But Daniel stepped away from the podium, looking older, yet somehow lighter. For the first time in decades, he'd chosen truth over power, conscience over reputation. Back in Ethan's living room, the phone began ringing. Text messages flooded in. Outside, car doors slammed as supporters arrived to celebrate. But Ethan remained still, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. His name was cleared, the corruption exposed. Justice delivered by the most unexpected ally. Lily looked up at her father, her eyes wise beyond their years. "Is Grandpa Daniel going to visit us now?" Ethan hugged her close, watching as the news channels replayed Daniel's confession. The man on screen wasn't the cold billionaire who'd tried to buy their silence. This was someone transformed by love, broken open by the weight of his mistakes, and finally choosing to make things right. Dark clouds gathered over Central Memorial Hospital as dozens of protesters lined the entrance, their signs held high against the morning drizzle. "Justice for Ethan!" they chanted, their voices echoing off the building's cold stone walls. Veterans in weathered uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with church members and local families, creating a sea of determined faces. Inside the hospital's executive wing, Daniel Harrington straightened his tie and walked into the packed boardroom. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, whispering among themselves as rain peppered the windows. "This emergency session of the hospital board will come to order," announced the chairman, his voice wavering slightly. The room fell silent, except for the distant chants from outside. Daniel rose from his seat, commanding attention with his presence. "Before we begin, I want everyone to look at these." He spread photographs across the polished table, documentation of years of negligence, particularly toward veterans. "This stops today." The arrogant ER doctor who had dismissed Ethan sat at the far end, his face pale and tight. Nurse Julia stood by the door, clutching a thick folder of evidence against her chest. "I move for immediate termination of Dr. Reynolds," Daniel's voice boomed through the room, "and the resignation of any board member who knew about these systematic failures and chose to look the other way." Protests erupted from several board members. "You can't just—" One started. "I can and I will," Daniel cut him off. "My family foundation controls 30% of this hospital's funding. Either we clean house today, or I pull every penny." The chairman dabbed sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Mr. Harrington, surely we can discuss this privately." "No more private discussions." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "Nurse Morales, please, step forward." Julia approached the table, her steps steady despite her nervousness. She opened her folder and began reading from documented incidents. On the night Mr. Cole came in, Dr. Reynolds specifically ignored clear symptoms of cardiac distress. This wasn't the first time. "I have records of 17 similar cases in the past year alone." The doctor jumped to his feet. "This is slander. You have no right." "Sit down," Daniel ordered, his voice ice cold. "You lost all rights when you leaked classified military files to discredit a decorated veteran." Outside, the chanting grew louder. Through the window, they could see more people joining the protest, including local news crews. The board secretary nervously took minutes as Julia continued her testimony, describing pattern after pattern of negligence. Some board members looked physically ill as the evidence mounted. "I call for an immediate vote," Daniel announced when Julia finished. "Dr. Reynolds' termination and the resignation of board members complicit in the cover-up." The chairman cleared his throat. Those in favor, hands rose one by one. Even those who had initially protested could see the writing on the wall. The vote was unanimous. Dr. Reynolds stood up, his face red with anger. "You'll hear from my lawyers." "I look forward to it," Daniel replied calmly. "Security will escort you out." 2 guards appeared as if on cue, leading the former doctor away. Several board members quietly gathered their things and left. their resignations effective immediately. Daniel turned to the remaining members. Now, let's discuss reforms. I'm proposing a new Veterans Care Wing, funded by my foundation, mandatory sensitivity training for all staff, and a citizen oversight committee to ensure accountability. The door opened, and Ethan entered with little Lily holding his hand. The room fell silent. He stood tall in his military uniform, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Cole," Daniel said formally, "on behalf of this institution, I offer our deepest apologies. Your reputation has been fully restored, and we are implementing changes to ensure this never happens again." Lily broke free from her father's hand and ran to Daniel, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered. The remaining board members watched in amazement as the usually stoic Daniel Harrington's eyes filled with tears. Ethan lifted Lily onto his shoulders as they prepared to leave. In the hallway, a line of veterans snapped to attention, offering sharp salutes as father and daughter passed. Their faces beamed with pride and victory. Through the windows, they could see the protesters erupting in cheers as news of the decision spread. The morning rain had cleared, and sunlight streamed through the clouds, catching the medals on Ethan's chest as he carried his daughter high on his shoulders past the saluting veterans. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of First Community Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Ethan Cole sat with his shoulders straight, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. 7-year-old Lily nestled against his side, her small hand wrapped tightly in his. To their left, looking somewhat out of place in his expensive suit, sat Daniel Harrington. The familiar scent of old hymnals and wood polish filled the air as Pastor Mike stepped forward, his weathered face kind beneath his gray hair. "Today," he announced, his voice carrying to the back of the sanctuary, "we gather to pray for healing, not just of bodies, but of hearts and relationships." Lily looked up at her father, then over at Daniel, her innocent eyes taking in both men she now knew were her family. She wore a yellow dress that matched the morning sunshine, her dark hair tied back with a ribbon that had once belonged to her mother. "Would the Cole family and Mr. Harrington please come forward?" Pastor Mike gestured toward the altar. Ethan stood first, helping Lily to her feet. Daniel rose more slowly, uncertainty visible in his usually confident stance. As they walked down the center aisle, the congregation watched in respectful silence. Veterans who had supported Ethan through his ordeal nodded encouragingly. Nurse Julia, seated near the back, wiped away a tear. At the altar, Pastor Mike raised his hands. "Lord, we bring before you these 3 souls, connected by both pain and love. Guide them as they forge a new path together." Members of the congregation rose, moving forward to lay hands on Ethan's shoulders, on Daniel's back, and to touch Lily's head gently. The little girl closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her face as the prayers washed over them. "Help them find strength in forgiveness," Pastor Mike continued, "and show them the way to become the family you intended them to be." Ethan felt the weight of dozens of hands on his shoulders, the same community that had rallied behind him during his darkest hours. He glanced at Daniel and saw the older man's eyes were wet with tears. After the prayers, as the congregation began to disperse for coffee hour, Ethan and Daniel found themselves in the church garden. Lily played nearby, chasing butterflies among the roses while staying within her father's sight. "I never meant to hide from her," Daniel said quietly, watching his granddaughter. After your wife died, I buried myself in work, in denial. It was easier than facing what I'd done." Ethan nodded slowly. "Sarah never spoke much about her father, just said he'd chosen his career over family. I did." Daniel's admission came with visible pain. "I thought I was building a legacy, but I was destroying one instead. When Lily called me Daddy that day in the hospital." He paused, composing himself. "It was like Sarah was speaking to me through her, giving me one last chance to make things right." Lily's laughter floated across the garden as she discovered a particularly beautiful butterfly. The sound seemed to touch something deep in both men's hearts. "She deserves to know where she comes from," Ethan said finally. "Who her mother was, who her family island, all of it, the good and the bad." Daniel turned to face him directly. "I want to be part of her life, Ethan. Not to replace anyone, but to add to the love she already has. To tell her about her mother's childhood, show her pictures, share memories." "Sarah would have wanted that," Ethan admitted. "She always said everyone deserves a chance at redemption." The morning sun had risen higher, warming the garden. Church members mingled nearby, some watching the scene unfold with gentle smiles. These were the same people who had brought casseroles when Sarah died, who had helped Ethan through his recovery, who had stood with signs demanding justice outside the hospital. Lily skipped over to them, her face flushed with excitement. "Daddy! Grandpa Daniel! Look!" She held up a perfect yellow rose petal. "It's the same color as Mommy's favorite dress in the picture by my bed." Daniel's breath caught at her words. "She remembers that? I tell her stories every night," Ethan explained. "Show her pictures. Keep Sarah alive in her heart." "Your mother loved yellow," Daniel said softly to Lily. "When she was your age, our whole garden was full of yellow roses. She used to dance through them like a fairy princess," Lily finished, beaming. "Daddy told me." The two men exchanged glances, recognizing the threads of shared memory that bound them together through this child. Pastor Mike approached, coffee cup in hand. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said warmly. "Sometimes it takes our greatest trials to lead us to our greatest blessings." Ethan watched as Lily took both his hand and Daniel's, swinging them gently. The weight of recent events, his collapse, the hospital scandal, the vindication, seemed to lift slightly in the presence of her innocent joy. "The hospital board meets tomorrow to implement the new Veterans Care Program," Daniel mentioned. "I'd value your input, Ethan. Your experience could help shape something meaningful." "I'd like that," Ethan replied. "Turn something painful into something good." The church bells chimed, signaling the end of coffee hour. As congregants began heading to their cars, Lily tugged on both men's hands. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked hopefully. "Please." Ethan and Daniel shared a look of amusement. "What do you say?" Ethan asked the older man. "Ready for some grandfather-granddaughter time?" Daniel's face softened with gratitude. "More than ready." They walked toward the church steps together, Lily between them. At the bottom, they paused. The moment felt significant, not an ending, but a beginning. Ethan extended his hand to Daniel, who grasped it firmly. "For Sarah," Ethan said quietly. "For Sarah," Daniel agreed. And for Lily, their handshake sealed more than an agreement. It marked the start of a new chapter, one where past wounds could begin to heal through the love of a little girl who saw only family where others might see division. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the newly constructed Veterans Wing of Hope Memorial Hospital. Fresh red brick gleamed against the autumn sky, and a large blue ribbon stretched across the entrance. Carefully arranged white chairs filled the courtyard, now packed with community members, veterans, and hospital staff who had gathered for the dedication ceremony. Ethan Cole adjusted his tie, still not quite comfortable in the crisp navy suit Daniel had insisted on buying him. His military medals, including his Special Ops Commendation, were pinned precisely on his lapel. Beside him, Lily twirled in her new powder blue dress, her patent leather shoes tapping against the concrete. "You look just like a princess," Ethan said, smoothing her hair. "Grandpa Daniel said I could pick any dress I wanted." Lily beamed, reaching up to touch the small pearl necklace at her throat, another gift from her newfound grandfather. Daniel Harrington stood at the podium, his usual stern businessman's demeanor softened by genuine emotion. The microphone carried his voice across the crowd. "This Veterans Wing represents more than just a building. It represents our commitment to those who served, our promise that no veteran will ever again be turned away or dismissed." His eyes found Ethan in the front row. "Sometimes it takes a brave man to show us our own failures, and sometimes it takes the innocent wisdom of a child to help us find our humanity again." Daniel's voice caught slightly as he looked at Lily. Nurse Julia, now promoted to head of Veterans Services, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dr. Harold, the retired cardiologist who had saved Ethan's life, sat nearby, nodding in approval. Members of the Veteran Brotherhood filled several rows, their presence a reminder of the unity that had helped expose the truth. "And now," Daniel continued, "I'm honored to announce that Ethan Cole has accepted the position of Director of Veteran Outreach and Advocacy. His experience, integrity, and compassion make him the perfect choice to ensure this facility truly serves those who served us." The applause was thunderous. Ethan felt Lily squeeze his hand as several veterans stood, offering sharp salutes. The morning's job offer had caught him by surprise, but looking at the new wing, with its promise of compassionate care and dignity for veterans, He knew he'd made the right choice in accepting. Daniel gestured them forward. "Would my granddaughter and her father please join me for the ribbon cutting?" Lily practically bounced up the steps to the podium, while Ethan followed with measured steps. Daniel handed Lily a large pair of ceremonial scissors, helping her grip them while Ethan steadied her from behind. "Together," Daniel said softly. The three of them cut through the ribbon as cameras flashed. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Lily threw her arms around both men's legs, creating a moment of unexpected intimacy that drew appreciative awes from the audience. As dusk settled, the celebration continued with music and refreshments. Paper lanterns twinkled in the trees, and the smell of barbecue wafted from food trucks parked nearby. Daniel had insisted on making it a true community celebration. Ethan watched as Lily danced with other children on the makeshift dance floor, her dress spinning out around her. Several of his veteran brothers clapped him on the back, expressing their pride in his new role. Nurse Julia hugged him, whispering, "You did it! You really changed things." The first firework burst overhead in a shower of gold sparks, drawing gasps from the crowd. Lily ran back to Ethan, and he scooped her up in his arms. Together they watched as red, white, and blue fireworks painted the darkening sky. "We're safe now, baby girl," Ethan whispered into her hair, holding her close. Lily snuggled against his chest, her voice soft but clear. "Mommy said you'd always protect me." More fireworks illuminated their faces as father and daughter stood together, watching the celebration of not just a new building, but of justice, family, and healing finally achieved. Twinkling string lights crisscrossed the community center's ceiling, casting a warm glow over the polished wooden floor below. The space had been transformed into a magical wonderland, with white tablecloths adorning round tables and vases of wildflowers adding splashes of color throughout the room. The scent of fresh-baked cookies and punch filled the air as veterans, hospital staff, and families mingled in celebration. Ethan stood near the refreshment table, his tie now slightly loosened, watching the joy unfold around him. Nurse Julia chatted with Dr. Harold by the window, both of them finally able to relax after months of tension. Members of the Veteran Brotherhood, some in wheelchairs and others with service dogs by their side, shared stories and laughter with hospital board members who had once seemed so distant and unreachable. Lily tugged at his sleeve, her blue dress swishing as she bounced on her toes. "Daddy, can we dance? Please?" Ethan's heart melted at the sight of her eager face. "Of course, princess." He took her small hand in his and led her to the center of the floor, just as the band began playing a gentle melody. "Stand on my feet," he whispered, helping her balance on his polished dress shoes. Lily giggled as they began to sway, her arms wrapped around his waist while his hands held her steady. The lights above twinkled like stars, reflecting in her eyes as she looked up at him with pure adoration. From across the room, Daniel watched the pair with moistening eyes. He stood straighter in his expensive suit, but gone was the cold authority that had once defined him. Instead, a gentle smile played across his features as he observed his granddaughter dancing with the man who had raised her with such devoted love. Other couples began joining them on the dance floor. Pastor Mike and his wife glided past, offering warm smiles. An elderly veteran in his dress uniform danced with his great-granddaughter, while a young nurse helped a wounded warrior navigate his wheelchair in time to the music. The band smoothly transitioned to "What a Wonderful World," and more people filtered onto the floor. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had brought meals during their darkest days, danced with her husband. The Thompson family, who had organized prayer vigils, swayed nearby with their children. Race, status, and background melted away as the community moved as one, united by the journey they had shared. "Remember when you taught me to dance in our living room?" Lily asked, her voice carrying that innocent wisdom that always touched hearts. After Mommy went to heaven, Ethan swallowed hard, thinking of those early days of grief when he'd put on music just to see his daughter smile. "I remember, baby girl. You were so tiny then." "But you never let me fall," she said simply, squeezing him tighter. Across the floor, Daniel caught Ethan's eye and nodded respectfully. The gesture spoke volumes: acknowledgement of the past, appreciation of the present, and hope for the future. Ethan nodded back, feeling the last fragments of tension dissolve between them. The Brotherhood veterans had pushed several tables together, creating an impromptu gathering spot where they welcomed everyone. The janitor who had helped expose evidence, The cafeteria workers who had smuggled extra food to Ethan during his hospital stay. The high school students who had organized social media campaigns. Their laughter and animated conversations filled the air with warmth. As they turned slowly, Ethan caught glimpses of the changes their struggle had sparked. The hospital's new chief of medicine, a compassionate woman selected by a reformed board, chatted with families about their needs. Young doctors listened intently to veterans sharing their experiences, learning lessons no textbook could teach. The boundaries that had once divided them had crumbled, replaced by genuine understanding and respect. Lily's head rested against Ethan's chest as they continued to sway. Her small fingers played with his medals, no longer symbols of pain but badges of honor that had helped bring healing to their community. The string lights cast dancing shadows across her peaceful face, reminding Ethan of stars on desert nights when he'd prayed to make it home to her. The music softened, and Ethan lifted Lily into his arms, her legs wrapping around his waist like when she was smaller. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and chocolate cookies, her warmth against his chest more precious than any medal he'd ever earned. "Daddy?" she whispered against his neck. "Yes, baby girl? Are you happy now?" Ethan looked around at the room full of people who had become family, at Daniel who had found redemption, at the veterans who had stood beside him, and at the community that had refused to let them fall. But mostly, he looked at his daughter, his miracle, his anchor, his reason for never giving up. Pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, he whispered, "We're home." Lily smiled sleepily, secure in her father's arms, as they swayed beneath the twinkling lights. Around them, the community continued to dance, their movements a testament to unity, their presence a celebration of faith restored and love triumphant. The band played on, soft and sweet, as healing hearts beat in time with the music. In that moment, under strings of golden light, with his daughter in his arms and surrounded by the warmth of true community, Ethan felt the full weight of their journey settle into place, not as a burden, but as a foundation for something beautiful and lasting. "We're home," Lily echoed softly, and in those two words lay all the hope, faith, and redemption they had fought so hard to find. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.